Good morning, everyone. So welcome to our panel, AI in Action. I'm Kim. I'm your host for the panel today. I'm a partner at OC&C Strategy Consultants, where I specialize in media, and I have a particular interest in technological change. We are lucky enough to have three panelists who are at the forefront of AI and TV production to share how AI is moving from hype to practical use cases and shaping the way that shows are being developed, pitched, and produced. So let me introduce, at the end there, Helen Killeen. She is the Director of Production for ITV Studios UK and Scripted. She oversees 11 labels who produce everything from Love Island and I'm a Celebrity to Come Dine With Me, Daytime and Sport. And as such, she's deep in the nuts and bolts of using AI in TV production. She co-chairs ITV Studios' Global Innovation Hub and is passionate about how technology and innovation can drive more creative and efficient productions. Matthew Wilson is Chief Legal Officer at Fremantle. Alongside legal and business affairs, he oversees the company's AI and tech operations, guiding strategy on everything from the opportunities and challenges presented by AI to rights and regulation. He's got a particularly good view on the organizational how of implementing AI. Donna Mulvey-Jones was previously at Netflix, but has now taken on a new role at Banijay UK as Director of Post-Production. She's looking to bring more strategy and coherence to post-production across the UK group and has now opened in-house studios to build internal capability. She's on a roadmap where she believes both assistive and generative AI will be necessary to bring efficiency and innovation to the operation. And just before we start, I'm just going to set the scene for this panel with the hype and investment in AI and some of the gaps we have today. So the hype, it's not so much hype as huge investment and expectation, lots of investment, incredible progress in what AI can do, but it's actually still, you've all heard it, I'm sure, hugely loss-making, and the commercial use cases are still nascent. And we'll have a little peek at what investors are shooting for with this next stage of investment. Pictures tell 1,000 words, so these illustrate how investment in time, brain power, and resources have accelerated in the last 5 years. So the first one up there is global developers in the NVIDIA ecosystem, people working on AI chips. You can see it's increased 6 times. Patents being filed. You can see that since 2024, there's been a massive increase in the number of patents, similar or actually more than when there was the initial internet boom. Money being invested in AI. So currently, it's around the 250 billion mark, but it's growing to 630 billion, or it's forecast to by 2028. And just, I thought it'd be worth contextualizing. So the global film and TV production spend is around 200 billion per annum. So what progress has been made? So this shows how AI performs against the MMLU test. Now that's the Massive Multitask Language Understanding Benchmark, which evaluates an LLM's performance across 57 academic and professional subjects. As at 2023, it exceeded average human performance, which is that baseline of 89.8%. I also thought it'd be good to have a little demonstration of how generative AI has changed in the last 2 years. So this is Will Smith eating spaghetti, generated in 2023, and now what you can do in 2025. I mean, 2 years progress, that is pretty incredible and funny. So why are people not using it more in work settings? And indeed, why are AI companies still so very much loss-making? Well, I liken having Gen AI today as having a really amazing but very inexperienced intern, a super intern, indeed. They hallucinate, kind of makes things up, sounds super confident on what they tell you. It's absolutely right until you ask them, are you really, really sure? They can be fragile. So great in controlled environments where it matches the training data it's been given, but once you deviate from that, it can throw it right off. It doesn't really have much common sense. Common sense isn't that common really, but anyone using ChatGPT will know it sounds so convincing, but fundamentally it just doesn't understand the world and the situations. So things like causal inference, multi-step reasoning, it's only really as good as what goes in terms of the training data. And that reliability gap is the barrier in business settings. So you can't really leave it or let it loose on its own. You need guardrails. It definitely needs human oversight, needs to be deployed really carefully, like that super intern that was born yesterday. And effectively, but that's where humans come in. So we need to guide it. We need to use it in the best possible way. So going forward, I wanted to share with you a bit about where we are today and where it's going. So the valuation of AI labs is about a third of the US economy. That's humongous. But revenue from those labs is only 15 billion. That investment has given us a massive acceleration in narrow AI and huge leaps and bounds in generative AI. But those levels of investments and those valuations are based on the hope and expectation of getting to more of agentic AI, where the AI can orchestrate and use those narrow AI tools for you, where they've been trained about the real world and have been given some of the common sense, and even in the future, where they might be in robotic bodies, think the synths in humans. So with that little scene setter, I wanted to get to the real business of today, which is our wonderful panel, and talk about how it's being used in TV production today. So I'd like to start with some current AI use cases. What are the most useful and valuable ways you're actively using AI in concept development or production or post-production? Could you share some examples? And if we start with you, Helen, please.
Yeah, sure. So we're at ITV Studios. We've got a number of labels, scripted and unscripted and international, and we're looking right across the piece through our Global Innovation Hub at how we can deploy AI more effectively across the business. There's lots of areas we're looking at, but I'll only talk about the ones that we're actually sort of doubling down on. So I'd say in development, it's casting, research, the production scheduling part of the process. So how can you help the PM teams do their job more effectively and efficiently? And then in post-production, so everything from text-based edits to auto-blurring and music replacement. So they're the sort of areas that we're doubling down on. I've got 3 examples of tools that we're using actively now. So I think some of the Lifted team are actually here, but Lifted Production, who make Love Island, they used Quicture on the summer series of Love Island this year. And Quicture is essentially an AI-powered video editing tool, and it can literally analyze on ingest. It can then transcribe all of what it's reading on ingest, and then it can allow you to text prompt edit. So the casting team used it in the final stages of the casting process. So they go through the hundreds and thousands of applicants that want to be on the show and want to be Islanders. And then when they whittle it down to that kind of short list, they need to film them and create sort of highlight reels for our M&E commissioning team. And they were previously able to do 1 VT a day, and they've now increased that to 3. So it's really reduced the amount of time it's taking to do that part of the process. So again, not the whole process, just the kind of final part of it, which has freed that team up to do the myriad of other things that our casting teams have to take care of. So we're going to look at Quicture more now across the whole piece, so other labels and other big reality shows, but also not just for casting. It can be used for social media highlights and cut downs, and also auto edits for highly formatted shows where you want to just literally sift through and provide for the editor, a timeline. So that's Quicture. And then Runway is the tool. I'm sure many of you've heard of Runway and are using it. And we've got an enterprise agreement with Runway. So that means that we've entered into a number of licenses with them. And we're sure that the data that we're using and the imagery and videos that we're using from there are cleared to use. And our teams, again, actually Lifted, I'm going to reference. So they are making a show with a co-pro, actually, with one of our American labels, Nobody's Hero. And it's coming out next year on ITV, make sure you watch it. It's called Nobody's Fall. And they used Runway in the development process to help the commissioners really visualize the game reality part of that series. And that helped get it over the line to green light. So we're seeing Runway as a tool for pitch decks and pilots. And I'm also going to mention Plimsoll, who are our natural history and factual label. They have literally just created their first fully AI non-TX pilot. And I won't say what it is or who it's for, but they've delivered it, and it's enabled them to do, looking back over periods of time that they would never have afforded in a non-TX pilot with VFX, using Runway in combination with Sora. So they're the sort of couple of areas that I think, you know, are worth mentioning, and tools that people should be looking at. And then actually I've noticed that Fiona from my graphics team is here, and the graphics team are looking at deploying, using ChatGPT in combination with GitHub Copilot, doing something called vibe coding, which I'm not going to pretend I know what it is, Fiona, but it enables the team to create on-screen graphical furniture, things like tickers, that previously they would have had to go to external specialists for, may have taken 2 weeks and a couple of thousand to create. They're now able to do that internally in a day. So we're seeing financial savings, but also giving the teams tools to be more creative and empowered. And they're the sort of main areas that we're doubling down on.
Wow, that sounds really impressive. It does. Matthew, have you got any insights into where it's being used?
So very similar to Helen. We're using a lot of the same tools and the same processes, and very much at this stage we're not really at the generative video end of the spectrum in terms of commercializing, but much more at looking at the production process and looking at the different use case and the different tools that we can bring into the production process and make things cheaper, quicker, more efficient in terms of breaking it down. And like Helen, pretty much all of the development work that we're doing now in terms of sizzles and so on and so forth, Runway, 11 Labs tend to be, I think we now have 4 or 5 shows that have been put into funded development off the back of sizzle reels that were, and pitch decks that were 90% or more of AI. So it's playing a significant part in the development process. And then when we get to production, we're using, again, many of the same tools, but also tools like Trint for the logging and transcription process. That's been pretty successful, especially in the last 6 months. And something we were talking about beforehand that I think is a point worth making is that some of the tools that started off maybe weren't so good and weren't so useful and weren't usable in the production process now have actually overtaken some of the ones that were better 6 months ago. So one of the challenges, I think, for all of us is making sure that we're up to date on what tool is best for the task at any given point in time. And of course, that might not be a daily thing, but every month or so, just checking in, and, is there a better tool out in the market? And it affects, how long we commit to these enterprise agreements for. So, like Helen, Sora, Runway, VO3 now is coming into the market. There's lots of tools doing the same kind of thing out there. We're doing a lot with voiceovers in our shows using 11 Labs, whether that's for cleanup or whether it's for usage in voiceovers, and implementation of visual elements. And we've actually got a clip lined up from The Masked Singer in Finland. So this is a combination of Runway and 11 Labs. This aired, I think, in the last couple of months, and it's in The Masked Singer, it's where you have the pre-performance video.
Wait, who are you?
I am a stray dog, and of course I won't fall for such an easy trap. I am not some Pavlov's dog. I have my own will and direction. But I'll tell you something. I have wandered through lands and pits, sunny streets and deep forest, and thus I am a gentle dog, not a sly cat or a noble horse. Maybe this is related to my DNA. I often long for something.
The sun is asleep. I'm dozing.
Sorry if I played that
No, not at all.
early.
So fairly obviously AI still, the association between the dog's feet and the ground, would probably use a bit of work, but for cutaway scenes like that, does it matter? And that's the trade-off, because in terms of speed and cost, so much quicker than I think it was about 70% saving, something like that. So much quicker than how we were doing it before.
Amazing. Shall we move to you?
There are a lot of similarities here. You guys have already mentioned a lot in the post-production space. I'd say post-production, and also, we're a group of production companies where we make a lot of content. And not only do we make a lot of content, but we make a lot of non-fiction content that also shoots a lot of content to make the content. And so ultimately, we're looking for tools, and we're looking for ways in which we can search our libraries, create libraries, search our media and content. And so we're looking for AI tools that can help us with that, creating the metadata to do that indexing. And so one of the ways, and whether that be, for example, like speech to text, so that kind of traditional transcription that you guys have touched upon, whether it be object recognition, scene recognition, character recognition, and then ultimately then we can build those automated processes on top to enable us to do things like text to edit. Again, things where you're like, now you've got your transcript, you can do a bit of a paper edit, and then suddenly you're speeding up the process of post-production. And what we're also looking at is if you're able to search your content and identify what you have, that's where we can then monetize our content for things like social media platforms. So suddenly you've got this wealth of content that you've made MasterChef in all these different countries and all these different versions over the years. And yet, traditionally, we've not been able to do anything much with that because you can't find it, you don't know what's there. So it's really maximizing your content and finding ways to monetize that in today's market. And so in terms of tools, you've mentioned a few already. I'll throw in Moments Lab, which is a company that we're doing some work with, primarily at a global level. Because what we're entering in with Moments Lab is we're using that tool to go through our catalogue of finished content so that we can find those moments, capture those moments, and then create clips for social media, for example. And Moments Lab is great. I've looked at that as a tool for production making. I think what becomes interesting and what we'll probably talk about later is there's so many different tools out there, but why you would apply them to different situations depends on what you're trying to achieve and what your budget is. So Moments Lab, we could run all of our rushes from a series through that, for example, but do we want to be paying that price level when we might just need to have a transcription and we can then use Avid pretty much for free because it comes with our Avid Ultimate licenses, and then the transcripts are enough. So, Avid can do that. Moments Lab can do something even better, but do you need it? Are you going to pay the £13 an hour when you could pay nothing? And then the other tool that we've been using for the diarization, so the idea of doing a transcript and recognizing who's saying that, is Tanuki, which isn't an AI tool. It's a production software tool, but it has AI features. And where we found the diarization on Tanuki so good is an example would be a TV series that we do called 99 to Beat, where there's 99 contestants, all like on a game show trying to become the winner. And once you've identified that character once, it recognises that character on all of your transcripts throughout the entire series. So we might be paying, let's say, £6 an hour to use that tool as opposed to what could be free in Avid, but then you're getting the benefit of that efficiency because you need it on a series like that where you want to always be able to find what did number 37 say throughout the series. So there's lots of different tools, and it's not even necessarily that some are better than others. It might just be that some are more applicable to different situations. The other thing, Quicture, is something else we're looking into. Quicture can also do that kind of object where it's moving into doing more like object recognition, character recognition. And then for something like that, you'd be paying, let's say, £500 a month. So you're not paying for how many hours you're putting through, you're paying for a license. And then it will allow you to do other automated processes, like, for example, sync pulling. So instead of paying someone for a week to go through and identify or the string out of what a particular character said, you have the technology that can do it for you. I think as well, you talked about removals of music. I think that's really important, especially when it comes to monetizing content if you've already got music bedded in and you don't have the split WAVs. Then there are tools out there like Audio Shake, I think is one that we'd probably lean into, where you can remove the music so that you can actually cut your clips together without having that music jumping around in the background. We have a music library called Beacon Music, which I think sits on the Universal Music platform, and music sound-alikes using AI these days, where you can put in a track that you want to use but you can't afford, and it will tell you, it'll literally identify exactly what track out of the library that you could use in place. And then also one of our European teams is using, actually a couple of European teams for Fremantle as well, I believe. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't say that, but is a tool called FrySpace. It's a German company that are doing resource management software. And so that's kind of piqued my interest for next year. And I know that they're doing that with some companies in the UK now, where you can literally talk to your schedule and say, tell me which edit suites are free, or tell me which editor worked with this producer last time, and just ways of which that you can use AI to just have conversations with it and help find you spare edit suites, talent identification and things like that. So, sorry, that was a long list, but that's what we're using at the moment.
It's such an impressive list. It's such an impressive suite of things that you are all implementing in your organizations. And what I get, or what I'm taking away from it, is you're experimenting furiously. You're seeing already massive improvements in the speed of doing things, reductions in cost, therefore, but you're also working with many different tools, and there's always a new one coming up, and you're always needing to evaluate which one is the right one. And there are also increased costs, different licenses, et cetera, et cetera. How in the organization are you getting the permissions, I suppose, almost to use the different tools? Do you have to kind of get permission to use different tools, or indeed to pay extra money for different modules, for example, or for a new kind of tool to implement?
Do you want to take that first?
Oh, sorry. Matthew?
Yeah, I'll have to give that one a go. So we put in an AI policy pretty early on in terms of setting up basic governance, but that was back in 2023 when ChatGPT had only just come out, and it was like, okay, can people use it at all? And the answer was yes, but if you're going to put it in, if you're going to use it for something that's going to be sold to a customer or appear on screen, come and talk to us and let's figure out whether you can actually do that or not, and we might need to go and talk to the customer. Since then, things have moved on considerably, as I'm sure they have for all of you. And now we have a pretty settled, streamlined process in place where if someone wants to include or use AI in a production, or there will be some things that are just signed off to use AI for. So marketing, development work, in people's day-to-day, just daily tasks. So we have enterprise agreements with OpenAI for ChatGPT usage, for Sora experimentation. We've got deals, of course, with Microsoft, like most of us do, and Copilot is becoming more and more part of just day-to-day working life. However, we're now seeing, as we've all been talking about, what do you do when someone wants to use AI in a show, actually as part of the production process? And it's no different to what you've all been doing for years, which is you need to make sure that whatever element you're going to be including in the show is rights cleared, or you can stand behind it. And to be able to do that, we have a process in place where the producers and the production staff will work closely with the legal teams, and we sign off specific use cases where there's been checks gone in place. That goes into a repository. Those use cases are then signed off for particular jurisdictions, and then people know they can use those tools with confidence. Now, all that said, we have a phrase internally which it starts with a human and ends with a human. And even though those tools might be signed off, Kim had on her slide earlier about hallucinations. It still needs a human to apply some common sense and look at the outputs and just make sure that there's nothing in there that could cause us trouble further down the line. And the last thing I'd add, of course, that's all fine, But if you're then going to deliver it to one of your customers, you need to be sure that the customer is comfortable with having AI being used as part of the production process, even if it's in the production workflows versus AI-generated content appearing on screen, like we saw recently in some of the Netflix shows. I think it was the Eternaught, wasn't it, that had a few seconds of AI up on screen. And that's pretty much how it works. But we have a settled governance process with a central kind of inbox where people can say if they've got questions, they can come in, and then those questions go to the right person pretty quickly.
And Helen, how does that work?
Quite similar. We have a head of AI, Paul Kerrison, and he's got an assistant called Jen, and we do call her Gen AI. And we have an oversight group, which our CTO, and Clive actually who's here today sits on that oversight group. Our CTO and our CDO kind of chair that group, and I sit on it as well. So use case requests come up to that group, and it's legally kind of kick the tires of, and it goes through the full process before we sign it off. I think the production teams find that frustrating because they want it now, and it takes quite a while, obviously, to go through the legals. And similarly, we do have some enterprise agreements with the same sort of big media platforms, and we're only going to add to that and hopefully get quicker at the sign-off process. And Paul and the team, they are a small, lean team, but they go right across the whole of ITV Studios and ITV, and they do weekly drop-in training sessions on all of the different tools. They also keep a track of all of the use cases. So we've got I think we're at 250 use cases now. So they keep a track of who's doing what and who's using what, who's also using the licenses, because if they note that you've not used your license for a month, they'll kick you off it and reapply it to somebody else. So it's quite well managed, and I would say that we're now looking at those amalgamation tools, those tools that you can do 5 things in one platform. So, Omnigem, Invisible Universe, those types of tools that you don't need 5 licenses, you just need 1, and then you can pick and choose, which tool you're going to use for whichever piece of the process you're working on. So yeah, I would say it's quite a lean process, but it still does take time, especially for the legal bit.
It does sound non-trivial for sure.
Yeah.
Donna?
Yeah, very similar. We have an AI steering group at a global level, so we're very aligned across all of our companies and regions, and we have representations there from legal, IT, post-production, production. So there's a lot of people involved in having these joined up conversations. We track what we're using, and there's a lot of just guidelines and guidance that I think productions want as well. There's a lot of tools out there, but they're not all necessarily legal to use or good to use or safe and secure to use. So I think it's good to have the committee there so that there is someone a group that people can go to make sure that what they're using is going to be appropriate, especially if it is going to be ultimately going into a TV show or a development process.
Great. I want to take us back to use cases and think about nascent areas. So kind of future cases where you see that AI tools are currently less well developed, but you see that there's the opportunity for AI to streamline or to unlock. Should we start with you, Matthew?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think the one that we're kind of all waiting for, and certainly at Fremantle, is to get to a place where VFX and SFX can really be substantially done by AI in a controllable way, and it's getting there. I mean, even if we go back 12 months, the improvements that have taken place on platforms like VO3, like Sora, Runway in that 12-month period have been significant, and that will only continue in the weeks and months to come. We were talking earlier about the association between the ground and moving objects. That is improving all the time. Facial manipulation, adding voice to video simultaneously is improving all the time, especially on something like VO3. And so I think for us, that's the biggest thing, because when we think about any kind of big drama show, for example, the cost line for SFX and VFX can be significant. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting there. We run experiments on a regular basis based on. So for example, we had a show called Night Sleeper that was out last year, and it has an exploding train in in the show. And so what we've tried to do is take the raw footage and then every so often see if we compare the traditional way of doing it to the AI tools that are available and see how interesting we can make it, how accurate, is it controllable, so we can control the AI to such an extent where we can make it almost identical to the original, using text prompts and so on and so forth, and how much do we still need to use traditional tools versus the AI tooling. And it's a really interesting process to monitor just how good the AI tools are getting.
And so do you already do the post-production work largely in-house rather than contracting it out?
It's a mixture. Yeah. But we have around the world we have significant post-production capability in-house. But for some shows we still go out.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you, Donna, because it's interesting in the context of it being brought in-house with you bring it in-house. So I'd love to hear what your response or your thoughts on the kind of VFX and X and SFX.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, when it comes to creating video from scratch in a generative AI world, I don't mind sharing a little story here, because I think I can get quite overexcited by new technology. And I did a launch party for when I opened the doors for Banijay UK's in-house division this year. And one of the things I got really excited about was bringing in companies to demonstrate where the future is going. And one of the demos was Adobe's Firefly, which, by the way, is absolutely insanely fabulous. But I'm just going to say but here, because you can see a tool like Firefly, and we were interested, I think, with Firefly because it's of the commercial safety behind it. So with Firefly, the content that is going into what you're generating is commercially safe. It's all cleared and it's from approved stock images and footage. So we were doing this demo and it was creating amazing things. But what wasn't clear, I think, when people were like, I could create like development tasters from this and show reels. And then you realize, hang on a second, you can only create 5 seconds. And there's no character or scene recognition to the next clip. So it's almost as though, yes, that particular show reel was amazing, but how do you apply it in reality? And so I think that there's a way to go yet between almost like there's the potential of what the tech can do, but is it there yet to achieve what you need it to be? And I think when you talk about like direction of travel, I think we're just at IBC over in Amsterdam, and there were a couple of things that I walked away with. One of them was a company, and I'm not vouching for this company yet, by the way, because I've not even really seen a massive demo, but there was a company called Animatics that I was looking at. And I think it goes back to what you were saying around agentic AI tools and orchestration. I think we're moving to a place where you could go into, so with Animatics, you'd go in and you'd be doing, let's say, storyboarding, and you'd be saying, right, here's my character I want, here's the scene, here's the story, you'd be doing your prompts. But then it would be selecting which of those tools would be best for the job. Like, do you want to use Kling? Do you want to use 11 Labs? You don't need to go off and go and have contracts and trials with all of those different companies. You can do it all in one platform. And so I thought things like that was very smart. And then it builds in the automation for you. Right, now I've done all that, now go off and cut me a first cut. So I think that agentic AI and that orchestration is going to be where I see the direction of travel. And then the other thing that was announced at IBC that I'm kind of quite excited by is Avid finally, I say finally, joining the party. In fairness, I think there's been a bit of a thing going around that perhaps Avid were a little bit late to joining the party on some of these tools. And I feel like Avid really put a step forward at IBC with what they're coining Content Core. I think it's called Content Core. I have to say, I keep forgetting what it's called, but there you go, it's new. And we really want to be part of those trials in January for it launching next year, because for me, the idea of being in one environment, one ecosystem where you can pull in and integrate with different tools as needed, as best for the job, all in one place, and really, kind of get that efficient workflow, I think is going to be really important. And then the other thing that Avid was showing, which I got excited about, was where we could be eventually using AI for like analytics. So when you could be kind of saying, right, which are the bits of this that pop? What's the reaction? Where are the spicy moments in all of this footage? And really kind of doing some of that work for you. I think that's going to be where I think we see more and more. And then I will just say one other thing, which when you talked about unlocking, I've got a couple of one example from my Netflix days where I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I don't think anyone from Netflix is in the room. Is this going on YouTube? Maybe I shouldn't say this. Okay, anyway, the Jerry Springer documentary, I remember being in, that came out this year on Netflix, and I remember being in conversations where there was a notion of Jerry Springer doing the voiceover of that documentary. Now, Jerry passed away after the series got commissioned, but he had written a book. And so when we talk about like what technology can do and what it can unlock, I really like that example of where in that moment, ethically, you could get generative AI to create Jerry's voice because there's enough machine learning in there. And it would have been his words because it would have been his book, and they could have still put that over the documentary. Now, in the end, that isn't the route they took, but I think it's just a really good example of where you could use something that could creatively unlock doing something that could have had a really nice story there that wouldn't have broken ethics or moral codes, but would have been able to achieve something that would never have been able to be achieved before. And so I just like that example, and I thought I'd throw that out.
It's a brilliant example, Donna. And I just add to that by saying our German team at UFA took that kind of concept and then made it reality earlier this year in one of their big daily dramas, where the character had died, or the actress had died a number of years before, and the technology existed to essentially bring her back, but not using traditional CGI, using AI, and by analysing videos of her previous performances, and then adding in kind of the voice training and so on and so forth. And the ethical and moral consideration was, what does the family think about this? And the family were incredibly supportive. They actually really wanted the team to bring her back. And so she appeared on TV earlier this year, coming back in a kind of visit from beyond the grave scene, and it went down fantastically well. But as you say, there are considerations around all of that we're all going to have to grapple with as content makers in the months and years to come, because the ability we're all going to have at our fingertips to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do before at a cost and a speed that we couldn't have done them before is going to be quite a responsibility, I think.
Helen, I know it's hard to be last in a question when we've had so much already, but where do you think that there are opportunities in terms of how
we can move on? I think obviously you guys have said a lot, so we are looking at all of the areas that you described, but I think one of the areas for us is old IP that we own that will sit under our GP part of our distribution label. So bringing that out of the archives and bringing it back to life and putting it on some sort of fast channel for those audiences that are still there, and using AI, VO and Sora to be able to bring that to life, particularly animated old IP that I won't mention them, but you can probably imagine there's some very famous old IP that people might be excited about bringing back. So those are the sorts of areas that we're looking at, and it's really going to bring it back to life. The area I think, because you talked about areas not working so well, and I mentioned it to these guys earlier, is I don't think there is a really accurate AI logging tool out there. So for our big reality shows, we obviously have a number of loggers on site, and I haven't seen an AI tool yet that's able to really understand emotion, nuance, understand all the accents, if there's 4 or 5 of them speaking at the same time, be able to decipher who's speaking. So we're really looking at a tool that can do that for us, because it'll really be advantageous for those big reality shows. So they're the 2 areas I would add.
Thank you very much. So we talked a little bit about just processes of getting tools signed off, but I'd like to kind of go back to the organizational implementation part, more from a, how to get the organization around using AI. There is controversy, especially around use of AI in creative industries, whether it dilutes the creative process, what the IP issues are, people implications. How are you handling it? Matthew, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So we stood up our AI team about just over 12 months ago now, and very much kind of phase 1. And phase 1, there were 2 components to it. One was actual kind of starting to use the tools. But the more important, and we've spent a lot of time on that, but the more important component that we found was the cultural change process within the company. Because of course, Fremantle's a fairly big company, thousands of people around the world, and they've all been doing their jobs in the same kind of way. Of course, there's been incremental change over time, but by and large, people have been doing their jobs the same kind of way for the past 10, 15, 20 years. And AI suddenly come along and shaken all that up. And I don't know if you're all familiar with the kind of the grief cycle. The natural reaction to that can be a bit of sadness, a bit of anger. Why is my world changing around me? And that's completely natural. What we've done over the past year through doing some of the things that Helen was talking about as well, actually, is take people through the grief cycle. So they've gone through a bit of sadness, a bit of anger, a bit of reluctance, all the way through to curiosity. And now I think we're in a good place with excitement around learning how to use the tools, staying on top of what the new tools are, how do we incorporate them into our day jobs, and thinking really thoughtfully and mindfully about what it means for the future of our business and our industry. And so how has that happened? Well, there's been a lot of time spent on training. We've worked closely with OpenAI in particular on coming into the office. There isn't a week that goes by where there isn't, one way or another, a training session that's accessible to everyone around the world on how to use the tools better. Because on any kind of adoption curve, you get the early adopters that will be straight in and using ChatGPT the day it's launched. And of course, we have those people. But there is a whole long tail of folk who it takes time to onboard them, it takes time to get them up to speed. And that has been a constant process over the past year. And then when it comes to, but that only gets, as an organization, that only gets us from 0 to 1. This is quite a famous kind of concept in tech companies. That only gets us to 0 to 1. That's phase 1. And we now kind of feel we're at the end of phase 1 where people are excited. It's now, how do we scale that? How do we scale the things that we've been talking about this morning? And to do that, we've recognized that we don't necessarily have all the skills that we need at Fremantle already. But we have fantastic people, fantastic at what they do, but we now need to go and get some skills from adjacent industries. And so we've recently announced we've recruited our first global head of AI, who is an amazing person called Kevin Lingley, but he's come from Spotify, where he's already done managed their content platform. And so the way in which we're looking at that is that by bringing in people with that kind of skill set and that kind of depth of knowledge about AI processes and management of large amounts of data and so on, it will be really advantageous when we're looking at scaling what we do in terms of production processes around the world.
Thank you. Donna, what do you think in terms of the cultural change aspects?
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming, I think, for most people at the moment, and there's a real sense of FOMO, everyone feeling that other people are further ahead and what are we missing out on. That's probably why you're all here today, writing notes. We can all see what ITV and Fremantle are doing as well. But I think we are all on a journey, that we are in a beta stage, like there's a lot of testing and trialing. You mentioned earlier, Matt, even what is good or bad today, ask me again in 6 months, it's a different answer, it's a different company coming forward. And I don't think you need to be in ahead of the curve like you were talking about. If it's not your industry, it's okay to sit back and wait and see what other people are doing, and let them go first and let them trial things out. So, I think people feel overwhelmed, but there's a reassurance when people have got good case studies to tie to it. And I think that's probably where we're at. We're in that waiting of and maybe we're getting there now with some of Quickture, for example. We're all just in that next step where there's been enough people now that have just dipped their toe in the water. And I'm sure it won't be long before, we have more of those examples. So I think it's just going to take time. and I say education, it's not really that. I think it's just comfort, familiarity. There's so many more people now that are using ChatGPT than there was a year ago. Some people now use it every day and can't live without it, but there are still people who haven't even touched it yet and don't understand what it can do. But I don't think there's a right and wrong way. I just think for companies, there are certain baseline operational efficiencies that I think really need to be looked at, like monetizing archiving or putting the right business practices in place. But when I think it comes to creativity, I think it's, I don't think there's a right and wrong way, and I think it's just we're going on a journey together. So that's my opinion.
And Helen?
Well, we started our journey quite a while back because we put Paul in place, our head of AI that I talked about before, about 18 months ago, before he was put into his official role. So he'd already started working across the business and training people. And as you said, Matt, we've got training sessions every week. So I feel like it suddenly turned in the last maybe 8 months or so. So people went through I don't want to know, it's not happening, I'm going to carry on doing it my normal way, to, it's here and I better get to know how to use it. So I feel like in the sort of last 8 months, a lot of our labels, you've started to see them appoint their own sort of AI ambassador that kind of collaborates with Paul and is really asking for the training and asking to use the tools, and those use cases that I talked about have gone massively up in number. There was a little bit of nervousness and fear. People are worried, what if it's going to replace me, and what if me getting on board with it means I won't be in a job? But I think most people have realised that it's going to be able to enhance their role and make them more creative rather than replace them. And then the other thing I would say is we all have Gemini, so we're on G Suite right across ITV Studios. So the fact that everybody's got access to Gemini has meant that every time they open their emails, Gemini's going, can I help you write this? Can I help? So it's become a bit second nature that people do go into an AI tool on a daily basis. And that's, I think, really helped us get over that fear curve.
Great, thank you. So it feels like training, repeat usage, good examples of successes are all ways of helping to kind of get more of the reluctant people on board.
Yeah.
Great. I wanted to talk a bit about commissioner expectations and what you're seeing, because you're from the production companies. Are you seeing changes in what commissioners allow or expect regarding the use of AI in production? And actually, can I start with you, Helen?
Yeah, sure. So I would say there has been a change. There was certainly a nervousness and an absolute no, maybe 6 months ago even. But, I gave some examples at the start where it's really aided the commissioning process with Nobody's Fool and that pilot that we've made, which is with Plimsoll. So I think as long as you're transparent with the commissioner, you're really clear about what you're using and where you're using it. Are you using it in the pitching process? Are you going to use it in parts of the actual delivery of the show? And what are the tools? So they can make a conscious decision about how they are transparent about that with their viewing audience. So I find it's a much more open conversation now. It used to be an absolute no. Now it's a, okay, tell me more and let me see how this can enhance my product.
Donna.
What I can say is that I think what commissioners are expecting is that we deliver a lot for not much money. And so what I do think is that it goes back to using AI to really make processes more efficient. And I think that's probably why conversations are opening up, because we have to find ways. I mean, certainly in post-production, I would say as well, we're in an industry that collectively have got a lot of challenges, and we have to find ways to make content cheaper. It will be interesting, I think, because we're all finding ways to do things more efficiently. It will be interesting to see where the benefit of those efficiencies finally land. In post-production, I'm trying to do things efficiently so that I can be efficient in post, but then will the benefit be with that, or will it be with the production? Will it be back at the commissioner level? I don't know. I don't think we've got that far yet. But I think we are all scrambling to find ways to do things better and do more for the money. So I think that's where we're going to need to lean into these tools.
And Matthew.
I'll just add one very quick thing. Completely agree with Donna and Helen. I think we're in terms of commissioner expectations, we are far more able to have conversations now about the usage of AI and where we can and can't use it. That's great. I'm starting to feel that expectations generally, you were saying, Kim, we're at the top of that hype cycle. And then typically in technology curves, you get to a trough of disillusionment. It feels at the moment that because we're at the top of that hype cycle, some of the expectations around what AI will be able to do today and tomorrow, in terms of both cost and speed, are maybe getting a bit beyond what its actual capabilities are. And so the danger there is that being asked to do more for less, it becomes potentially an impossibility at the kind of quality that it is expected. But let's see. We're not quite there yet, but that's something to keep an eye on, I think.
Watch out.
I think it's a good watch out, yeah. And just to go back on the culture bit quickly, because I think there's another video that we were going to show.
There was, yes.
And this is just to say that what we've also been encouraging people to do, even if AI tools haven't been ready to go up on the screen in delivered work, what we've been trying to get people to do consistently over the last year is experiment, because they will be ready at some point. And so having people familiar and fluent in using those tools is really important. And so this is just a video of what some people have come up with over the last year.
I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, but before we do that, I wanted to ask each of you if you had both advice for smaller indies, but also advice for freelancers. Maybe you can do them together. Shall we start with Helen?
Yeah. So I would say it's tough for smaller indies because obviously this is a super expensive thing to implement, isn't it, to get all the legal advice and to get these big enterprise agreements. But I would certainly say get an AI policy because if you aren't clear with your team, and I don't mean a 36-page deck, I just mean a one page that they can embrace with 10 points on it. So every day you know that the people working with you and for you are super clear on where you stand on AI. There is a company called Amici, which I don't know what it stands for, but it's AIMICI, and they are a consultancy company, so they can come in and help you put in an AI policy, give you legal advice, train your teams, and the kind of a pay-as-you-go model. So I think they are looking at doing some training with screen skills as well. So if there's anybody interested in contacting them, they're a useful company and they're lovely. And I'd say for freelancers, just get yourself trained. There's a ton of free courses out there. Google, run them, IBM, run them, AWS. If you aren't doing it, I don't know why, because in 100 CVs, yours is going to sift to the top if you've got an accreditation in AI. So that would be my one big takeaway. That's what I would be doing if I were a freelancer right now.
Thank you, Helen. Matthew.
Yeah, all of the above really. The other thing that I would add is that whether a freelancer or a smaller indie or indeed a company like ours, sometimes the best way to get started is to ask ChatGPT. And you will be amazed at how much that can help you, whether it's devising policies, whether it's getting to explain how you do things using AI and the different tools that are available. Asking ChatGPT is so powerful.
Great. And Donna?
I would probably start with saying just stay focused on the problem you're trying to solve for or the opportunity that's in front of you, as opposed to getting carried away with every single opportunity out there. And start by trying to get some free trials. I mean, a lot of these companies will give good deals or free trials so you can play around with things. Run some parallel workflows to reduce the risk of things not working properly. And then I think for freelancers and people certainly trying to get roles in the industry, maybe I'm a bit old school here, but I also think it might take away from like people understanding the kind of building blocks underneath, like AI. And I kind of use this really like bad example of like if you're getting into a cab in London and it's Uber and there's no Google Maps and it goes down and then they have literally no idea where they're taking you. Whereas, it's almost like I think we need to teach people some of the basics and fundamentals. AI is a tool. It shouldn't be that without AI, you don't know how something comes together and the foundational. So I think when we look at training and bringing things in, it's important to have the history of things as well. It is about using the tools. And yeah, have fun, knock yourself out.
And just before, so you guys should be thinking about if you have any questions for our wonderful panel. But before we do that, I wanted to ask, because we've talked about lots of tools today, if our audience were to take away one AI tool to experiment with, which would it be and why? And I'll start with you, Donna.
Oh, God. I mean, it depends on the problem you're trying to solve for. I'll go back to that. Is there one? I mean, if you're not using ChatGPT, like start there, definitely. I mean, obviously we've mentioned Quickchair. I would look at Quickchair and I would check out Moments Lab as well. To be honest, I think that is good. Maybe those two are enough.
Yes, thank you. Helen?
I would definitely take a look at Quitcher. But I would also take a look at Omnigen, which was the tool that I mentioned earlier, because it is an amalgamator. So particularly for freelancers and indies that don't want to pay for 5 licenses, you can do more of a pay-as-you-go. And the other one that does the same is Invisible Universe, but we found Omnigen slightly better. So I would have a look at that.
Thank you. And Matthew?
Here on the amalgamator tools, just be careful to look at the indemnities and what's provided, because just a warning. And then, but for me, whatever general AI tool you use, whether it's ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, Copilot, I would still say concentrate on those. Keep working with those. Why? Because almost certainly, and I can say this about myself more than anything, you're not using it. So none of us are using those tools to their full potential. The potential of those tools is just huge. And like getting good at sport or playing an instrument, it requires training and practice to get the most out of them. And so that would be mine.
Thank you very much. And I'm looking to the floor to see if there are any questions. I'm going to take one from this side. Lady in the black top in the front. Yes. Wait. I think they would like you to wait until the mic gets to you, though.
It's going to be a very short question. But, I'm Annie Krukowska from Animo IQ, working with AI, obviously. I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about disclosing that AI was used to produce in the production or post-production? Do we care as audiences and producers, or how do you feel about it? Maybe starting with the lawyer?
To be a lawyer for a second then. It will probably get to a point where, in terms of disclosure, we don't have an option. So it's a bit like if you think about a factual piece of programming and you're doing a reconstruction, you disclose that it's a reconstruction. Under the EU AI Act, there are transparency obligations. Okay, the UK is no longer part of the EU, but we can expect, I think, similar things to happen here. Now, the question will be, what is the extent that you have to go to make that disclosure on the screen? Is it something like, when you have product placement today, you have a little logo in the screen when you come back from an ad break? Is it going to be like that, or is it going to have to be more in a piece of news programming? If the footage is AI generated, you're probably going to have to be more explicit. Personally, I don't have an issue with it, but I would want to know when I'm looking at something on the screen that's not real.
How about gentleman in the red T-shirt?
Hello, thank you for that. I can't wait for my AI to type up these notes. We've been talking a little bit about kind of ethics and morality, and I guess we can sort of use AI as, to our heart's content. It is all kind of defined essentially by kind of regulation, and I wondered what your thought was in terms of, have Ofcom said anything about the use of AI in television productions, and where do you think regulation in that sort of space is going to go?
Is that directed to any particular panel member?
Anyone who knows the answer.
Okay, so as things stand today, there is a lot of conversation going on between various industry groups and government on where things are going to land and settle. Nothing is decided over and above things like the EU AI Act. There has been consultations going on for the best part of the last year on AI and copyright and things like the text and data mining exemption. And so that's the extent to which AI companies can come and take people's content and use it to train their models, and whether they have to pay for it, whether they need to seek permission and approval and so on. Those conversations will continue for a while. What I've seen among the industry is, in the last 6 months in particular, the industry has started to get more organised around what it wants and what it needs from government. Now, the challenge in the globalised world that we live in is that we can have a view, we might even land on a view as the UK, but if China are doing something different, if the US are going off in a different direction, the EU are typically more conservative, what does that fragmentation mean for our content when the content's available anywhere in the world? So it creates a really complicated enforcement map.
I'm going to go on this side of the room now, actually. Lady in the black, yes, you.
One of the big issues that has been discussed in the industry lately is the number of freelancers in production who are out of work. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you think AI is going to affect this issue, where it will potentially help it, and also where and how it will exacerbate this issue. I don't know who in particular that might go to, but
Well, I feel like
anyone might have thought.
I don't know who asked that question. I can't quite see you. I think there is a nervousness. Obviously, the freelance industry is in the state it's in at the moment, not because of AI. It's because of what's happened in our industry, and I think we all know that. And there is a bunch of groups that we're all sitting on and being part of driving action for freelancers, etc. And we're trying to support more of our roles across unscripted and scripted being advertised and clearly being shared, so that everyone has a chance to apply for them, and not just kind of this industry, oh, I've worked with them before, so let's get them on again. So we are actively trying to promote and advertise all of our roles. I think AI isn't going to change or better that in any way. The only way I would say it would help you is if I said, like I said earlier, if you get training in AI, it's only going to help you get a role over somebody else, because if you've got 100 CVs and 10 of them have got an accreditation, you're going to go for the people that you know can help move your industry and product forward, rather than somebody that's working in a more traditional way. But, obviously there is a nervousness about how AI is going to impact the industry, but I think the industry's in a bit of a mess because of other reasons, not because of AI right now.
Gentleman in the front here. Yes.
Do I need the mic, or can everybody hear me?
I think they would like to. Can you start with your name and where you're from?
Really, it's super long and complicated, but okay. I'm Rayaman Mirza. I'm a composer, a producer, and I have a small tech startup. And this is actually a follow-up question. I guess it would start with Matthew, but I'd love to also hear from Helen and Donna specifically. The last thing you said was, I would want to know when I was watching something that was generated by AI. And can I just ask why, but also frame it specifically? If you were watching news or documentary, I would totally get that. But if it was pretty much anything else, why would you want to know, especially when we're now in an age where nobody signposts that they've just used CGI?
I saw your face as soon as I stopped, and I realised I hadn't put the bookend on it. So the bookend is exactly that. And what I was trying to say is it depends on the content that you're watching. So if it is news, in the world that we're living in, you're going to want to know that that footage that you're being shown is not what is really happening in that situation, that it's a reconstruction. And probably the same in factual documentaries as well. Although in some factual documentaries more recently, there have been usage of CGI and AI in order to tell the story, and it's become much more part of the narrative device. When it comes to scripted and so on and so forth, we've been living in that world for so long. And so it matters a lot less. And what you'll have, when I said I want to know, it just has to be somewhere. And usually that in a movie, it will be buried in the credits, like it has used these tools, these studios. So it will list out Runway and 11 Labs somewhere in the back end of the credits. So that was, when it comes to transparency, there's lots of different ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be kind of punching you in the face on the screen as you're watching.
And I would agree with that. I think coming from ITV and ITV Studios, one of the biggest words that we connect with our viewers on is trust. So, we have to be a trusted organisation, and everything we make, we have to be open and honest and transparent with our viewers about how we've made it, and that they can trust us, that the information we're giving them is correct, whether that is in news or factual, or even how we're portraying a drama like Mr. Bates, for example. So for me, it's really important, and I think it will get to a place where people will want farm fresh, and they'll want to know that every part of this didn't have anything synthetic in it. But there'll be certain types of content where people don't mind and just consume it. So I think we're moving into sort of two worlds there.
Yeah, nothing to add. Exactly.
How about, I was going to say, Gentleman in the white, is it white shirt? Yes, white shirt.
Thanks very much, Andrew Eborn, Octopus TV, barrister, broadcaster and futurist. Brilliant presentations today. You talked about the seismic advances in technology, but there's always a balance with the underlying rights. And you talk about things like deceased character reappearance, Jerry Springer in his own words, delicious, and so on and so forth. I'd be interested in all your views, including Kim's, on how you make the balance between technology and what's possible and the underlying rights, because that was front and center, for example, the SAG-AFTRA walkout, if you like, in Hollywood, and so on and so forth. How do we reconcile that, and what is the solution when you get so many underlying works to produce things? How do you divvy up the money?
And I'll just also add, I don't even think it's just the rights, I think it's the ethics as well. And there are examples, probably more examples for me when I was at Netflix, where the technology allowed something, but to your point, and I'll give you one example that was even just like with unscripted television, there's a lot of editing that happens. It's not all just exactly reality as it happened. Sorry to shatter that dream if you think it is, but it's like, we were testing 11 labs, for example, to kind of smooth out the intonation, because they're all words that the contributor said, but just not in that particular order. So, and it still airs like that. And if you're watching Netflix, even with your headphones, you'll hear that frankenbiting of editing. It happens all over the place in reality. And we had that option to smooth it out, and no one felt comfortable about it. Now, to Helen's point, maybe they're doing that now because this was a year ago and things have changed. But we were already breaking the ethics by cutting it like that in the first place, but nobody wanted to use the technology to make it sound better. And so I think they're conversations, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Eventually, I think we'll end up using that technology just to give the viewers a better experience. On a reality show where the context is different to a documentary or news programme. So I think it's just how comfortable people feel, and I don't think there's a right answer to that.
On the rights side, I think it's really important that people who own the rights, which are very valuable and really critical, especially on generative AI to train the LLMs, that they are rewarded and compensated for the value that they bring and the value that they're contributing. It feels like the debate is going that direction, but it's now on the how. So how should they be compensated? Is it an opt-in or an opt-out way of contributing your right, and then how people exactly are compensated? But fundamentally, IP is really valuable. This country is amazing at creating the most valuable IP, and we need to make sure that the creators get the right recognition for the contributions that they put in. Other questions? I want to go to you.
I'm a post-production freelance drama supervisor, and I worked on a Euston Films Fremantle show called Night Sleeper, and I delivered every single one of the 1,400 VFX shots that Matthew was talking about. So I'd love to see what you've got. So it's here. So how are you individually going to persuade? Because your examples are all sort of mainly unscripted, and I do take on board the German one. But how are you going to tell Silverprint, or how are you going to tell Kudos, or The Forge, or Dancing Ledge to use more AI? Because I've noticed there's a lot of resistance from the creators. You know, they're working with Stephen Knight, they're working with Sarah Phelps. You know, how are you going to tell Ed Guiney to get on the AI train?
Can you go first?
Sure. It's quite the opposite, actually. It's less a question of telling, because I think telling generally doesn't work, and certainly not in this industry. The opposite is, so when I was talking about the cultural piece earlier, is showing what is possible and getting people to the point where they see AI as a tool and see AI in service of the creativity, where they're able to do things either more quickly or more cheaply, that unleashes the imagination and reduces the barriers to it. And some of those folk, I won't out them, but some of the folk you've listed are actually incredibly enthusiastic on experimenting with AI and embracing it and seeing what the art of the possible is to help bring their art to the screen, frankly. We were talking earlier, we were looking at, someone made the excellent point over here that there will still be a desire for traditional methods. It's a bit like painting. People still want paintings, they want to buy paintings, but they love photography. And now we've taken it on. There'll be a place for everything. The value chain, to the question about rights, will change. And as an industry, we need to be really mindful and cognizant of that change in the value chain and how it's going to shift and position ourselves correctly. Because from my point of view, what we don't want to end up with is a position that the music industry got itself into 10, 15 years ago, and fought, rather than fought against Napster and so on and so forth, rather than recognise this is going to be inevitable. How do we make the best out of it? And I think that's something that we all need to think carefully about.
I was just going to add to that. Scripted doesn't sound to me, but my brilliant colleague Matt Cleary is working very closely with Paul Kerrison, our head of AI, and they've got something called Skunkworks. I don't really know what it is, but it's just specifically for scripted, and they're going around all the scripted labels. And actually what we found is, although it's more challenging, I think, because it's highly freelanced, we are getting much more engagement from our scripted labels, and they want to trial this because there's much more of a difference, I think, to be made in the cost price in scripted with VFX and also with using Unreal in virtual production environments. I just think there's much more of a game-changing piece of tech there than perhaps in unscripted. So that's the way we're handling it, but we're not getting closed doors for sure. Matt is making great progress.
I'm afraid, I'm really sorry, but I'm afraid that we are already nearly 5 minutes off. Is everyone okay to give us another 2 minutes? Go on. I know, I feel the
pressure.
The audience has spoken.
I'm sorry, this may not live up to your expectations like some of the AI products out there. My name's Zin. I'm an assistant producer in Unscripted. Thank you very much, guys, for your time and insights. Sam Altman's talked about how he hopes GPT-5 will usher in the first one-person billion-dollar company. Similarly, but differently, do you foresee the age of the one-person production in-house? I know this is a reality already in audio, but I mean expanding that to TV and such. And then related to that, of course, OpenAI are actually releasing their first animated feature later this year or next year, I can't remember, called Critters. How soon is it, do you think, when you before your tech partners become your competitors?
That is quite a tough question, so to end with. Which of you would like to tackle it first?
So there's a few different components there. So tech partners becoming competitors, they already are, they have been for a long time. So whether it's YouTube and Google, and so co-opetition is a thing, and it will continue to be one. And the other components, the question was, one person. Yes, for sure. That already exists too, in terms of content that goes up onto YouTube. That content will get better and better, and the gap between the type of content that we all make and the content that can be made using AI is going to narrow. And that's a reality that we'll all have to get used to and live with operating within. That said, if you're one person, it's likely to be pure AI creation as opposed to the confluence of physical and artificial intelligence. So that's where the differentiation will still come in terms of what you can do and how people feel about it.
And I'll just add to that by saying we have a label called Zoo 55 that sits in ITV Studios, and there's lots of one-person creators in there, but again, it's all for social platforms. I don't see a one-person creator in our traditional non-scripted environment, and I don't see a world where unscripted reality will become fully AI. I know there's a bunch of AI influencers out there that people are paying to interact with. I think Michaela's one of them on Instagram, and she's got about 3 million followers, and she's not real. She has a relationship and she's a model, but I don't see a world where I think part of the reason that people watch reality is because they want to really see humans having real, raw emotions. They wouldn't react and respond and engage with that content so well if it was fully AI. So I don't see a one-man band in unscripted in any time soon.
And Donna, did you have anything to add?
I think there's a space for everything, and I think anything could happen. But there are going to be companies that focus on doing that, and then there's going to be companies that focus on other things. So, is it possible? Is it happening? Yes. Do people want to, make a business out of it? I think each to their own.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, thank you for staying with us. To our fantastic panel, Helen, Matthew, and Donna, for being such an amazing, engaged audience. And also thank you to the RTS for all the logistics, setting up this room, and hosting us in this wonderful venue. Have a very good rest of your day.